You never quite know when things are going to get out of hand out on the water and you're going to need a little assist, just like some of the things we'll see in this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. Our first story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to the Rhine River, where this was the scene just a little over a week ago, when all of a sudden a cargo vessel that was traversing the river began to approach a lock. Even though the lock gate was closed and the red light was on, the vessel continued forward and wound up ramming the gate of the lock, causing over $1.5 million worth of damage to the lock itself. Fortunately, during this incident, there were no injuries reported, but there was another vessel in the lock at the time of the incident, causing quite the stir. Fortunately, both boats did make it out with very little damage to the vessels themselves. Local authorities are investigating the situation as they are looking at charging the person who is driving the cargo vessel with endangering shipping traffic. Now, unfortunately for this crew, it was actually not the captain behind the helm. At the time of the incident, the co-captain was actually driving the vessel. Upon further investigation, though, authorities are saying that the co-captain was showing signs of possibly consuming a few adult beverages before the incident occurred. Now, at this time, no charges have been filed pending further investigation, but local authorities estimate the damage to the lock to be around $1.5 million and claim the repair work could take up to a year because the heavy lock gate would have to be custom made and put back in place. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to the Bahamas, where this was the scene just a little over a week ago as well, when over 100 Royal Caribbean cruise passengers were on an excursion on board a catamaran going to Blue Lagoon, when all of a sudden en route to Blue Lagoon, the vessel wound up hitting two large waves as passengers claimed, and the next thing they know, the vessel began to list. Quickly, crews started to panic on board the vessel. Most passengers did not have a clue what was going on, and the only thing that triggered passengers really to go ahead and get into panic mode is when they saw crew from the vessel begin to don life jackets themselves before even telling passengers to put them on. Many of the crew, once they got life jackets on and the vessel continued to list, started to actually jump overboard and abandon ship as people weren't sure if the vessel was going to fully capsize. Now, fortunately in this situation, there were several Good Samaritan vessels in the area at the time of the incident who were able to jump into action and help to begin pull the passengers out of the water. But again, it is still a wild scene to watch, and one that reminds you, if you ever get on a boat, make sure you know where your nearest life jacket is. If you're not sure, ask somebody from the crew of the vessel to point it out to you in case of an emergency so you know where to go to get yours. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to the Mediterranean and Black Sea, where this was the scene this past week when strong weather wound up moving through the area. In fact, some local authorities were saying some of these storms were some of the strongest they'd seen in the region in many years, causing no fewer than at least 5 vessels to find themselves in severe trouble during these storms, including many of them to wind up beached, just like the Italian ferry we seen here. This ferry was being towed to another port when its tow line broke during the poor weather, or like the general cargo ship Bahamas seen in these images here, which happened to be traversing along the northern coast of Turkey in the Black Sea when the severe weather hit and pushed the vessel ashore. The vessel had 11 crew members on board at the time of the incident. Fortunately, a local fire department wound up sending one of their ladder trucks to the scene to try and get the 11 crew members off, but due to the rough weather and the vessel listing back and forth, as they used the ladder to try and get crew members off, the vessel wound up hitting the ladder, damaging the truck, in which they had to call a second truck out to finish getting the crew members off the boat. The weather was so bad in many of these areas, several ports actually wound up suspending exports of items such as grain and fuel from their ports just to prevent ships from going out into the weather. Our next story to make the boating news this week is going to take us over to the Netherlands, where this was the scene just this past week when the cargo vessel Saracusa pulled into the port of Rotterdam and began to unload its cargo of salt, when all of a sudden the vessel began to split, as you see in the images here, causing water ingress into the vessel. Crews quickly jumped into action, lowering dewatering pumps trying to keep the vessel afloat. Now, fortunately for the crew of the vessel, this incident did occur at port, giving them ample access to the supplies and tools they needed to try and keep the vessel afloat during the incident. Crews did jump into action, and they were able to get most of the water depumped and try and keep up with the flow of water that was coming into the vessel. Fortunately, there were no injuries reported in this situation, and at this time, it's still not 100% determined exactly what caused the crack, but crews are investigating. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Boating News of the Week. If you ever see anything crazy happening on your waterways, be sure to hit us up on Facebook or Instagram and let us know, and you might see your stories over here, just like Kelly Switch and Miss Shizzle did this week. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and drop an anchor on the subscribe button here.